So the next talk is also a tag team. Stuart Kurkowski and Greg Brown.
Is that yours?
Title is Ad and In-Game Betting Use Cases for SCUDdy 224.
Testing. Yeah, there we go. Good. All right. Very good. Okay, I'll just stand up here. All right. How are you guys doing? I'm glad that we're presenting at the 5 o'clock hour. Perfect topic, ad and in-game betting. We're going to talk about how SCUDdy 224 is applicable in that particular area. So we're going to, this is kind of an outline for what we're going to talk about around the timeline from past to present, where we are in the future around SCUDdy 224 and addressable ads, how addressable ads is moving from theoretical to proven, an overview of some of the in-market use cases, and then we'll talk a little bit about how in-game betting could use SCUDdy 224. And this is kind of, we have a combo as far as I'm going to be talking more on the business side, and Stuart's going to be talking more on the technical side. So first, we're going to talk about addressable ads. So addressable TV is something that's been talked about for quite a long time. It's been slow but steady adoption. The content distributors and content providers are now getting technology that is upgraded to be able to accommodate addressable ads. The standardization continues to be something that limits the addressable reach and capabilities, which is one of the things that SCUDdy 224 is doing a good job of helping with. There's still issues around measurement of audiences and things like that, but there is continued optimism in the space around scale, enhanced targeting capabilities, and it's proven based on the expected $4.2 billion ad spending for linear addressable in 2024. Specifically as it relates to SCUDdy 224, there's three main use cases where it applies. First is around ad slot availability, and this is specifically being able to identify, the operators being able to identify which ads to replace to be addressable. It also can help with ad conflicting rules, so being able to identify, and Stuart will go into more of the technical details around this, around how the ad decisioning system can determine when which ads to be able to be shown based on the ad conflicting rules that the content providers and the advertisers want to enforce. And then finally, kind of a future use case is really around intelligent ad decisioning. And this is really around using SCUDdy 224 to enhance the ad experience by adding additional metadata within the ad payload around things like scene, actors, creatives, things like that, so that you can create even more targeted ads. The three main stakeholders in the addressable workflow are the content providers. Those are the ones that are actually creating the 224 streams and then providing it downstream to the rest of the ecosystem that has all the intelligent information in there to make the future decisions. The operators, again, like I talked about earlier, they're really more about ingesting the SCUDdy 224 data, and then determining which ads are addressable and which ads are not addressable, and then the ADS systems and other ad technology companies that can use the 224 data to be able to increase the intelligence of the ad capabilities. So I'll really quickly walk through this workflow that's up here around how the addressable workflow works for a content provider. So as you can see, kind of on the left side of the screen, you have the content provider that have the ad schedules and the ad rules. They are the top line. The red line is the video flow, so that's kind of the flow of the actual the live stream or the broadcast that's going through the system with the SCUDdy 35s, like what was mentioned earlier. And then in the bottom flow is the metadata workflow, where the SCUDdy 224 is going through a system like what we have at CTS. Is called Linear Rights Metadata Management System, which kind of normalizes the ad schedules, converts everything to SCUDdy 224, and then all the decisioning is happening downstream at the manifest manipulator based on the matching of the SCUDdy 35 and the SCUDdy 224. The first decisioning is to determine, if the ad slot is addressable or not, and then also the 224 data and the ad rules are then sent down to the ADS, and that is and then there's future decisioning made based on the data that's coming from the content provider with the SCUDdy 224 data on the ad conflicting rules. And then with the content aggregator, it's a similar workflow, just coming from the opposite side, where they are taking in multiple content providers' data and ad schedules and ad rules, taking it in, using something again like LRM to normalize the data into SCUDdy 224, and then making those decisions to determine which ads are addressable and which ads are not. So this is this is in production at Comcast today, as well as Charter, as far as how we are basically implementing addressable within this using this workflow. So I'm going to turn it over to Stuart, who's going to go more into the technical details of the SCUDdy 224, and as well as how the ad conflicting rules work.
Okay. Yeah, so obviously, quick cut over to 224 here to understand the media is the container that contains those instructions, and that's where the matching that Greg talked about, where the SCT35 is linked to it. That brings into play policies and then viewing policies. The viewing policies are where the audiences get connected with the actions, right? And so this is where you have most of the rich set of capabilities, where I can identify an audience either by a zip code, right, or an area, or a demographic, or it could also be an operator, right? One operator can do one thing, one operator can do something different, and I can have multiple different viewing policies, for that same trigger, that SCUDdy 35 trigger that we saw. And so here's an example for the advertising use case, where maybe I have video content that I'm delivering as a content provider to an operator, and one particular MVPD or operator has the rights to replace an ad, the other one doesn't, right? So I could do that with a single feed, with a single SC35 trigger, and then I just have a different set of viewing policies based on that audience. And so that's one example. Another example that Greg talked about was not only identifying that, but also adding inclusion rules and exclusion rules, right? Had a question from a talk earlier similar to this. Somebody said, well, we do this today with ADSs, right? We set up campaigns, we do those kinds of things. That's true, but the campaign is only as good as the information that it has, right? Which sometimes can be genre or a particular show or something. In this case, the content provider could provide you a lot more information about, in this example here, information about the preceding two ads, right? Maybe the baked-in ads were about a Coca-Cola ad, and so therefore they have the ad exclusion rules that you see here to not play a Pepsi ad, right? The ADS might have a campaign around the show content, but they're not going to know the ad information, and so they have the opportunity to include more information here because 224 is also out of band. Likewise, you could extend that to now across multiple breaks. You could also do scene-based recommendations, so not only what a previous ad was, but now as we leave the content, what the last scene was in the content, so now I could upsell an ad opportunity because I know more information, so I can provide those recommendations beyond what campaign is set up in the ad decisioning service, and then ultimately the inclusion exclusion rules could also be used for a similar case that way. So if we look, this kind of summarizes it. Again, advertising is one that's been talked about theoretically for a couple years. Now we're seeing it in action where I can identify the individual slots across multiple operators. I can identify different information to use, even different ad decisioning services. I can have inclusion or exclusion rules. These are all ways that I can enrich my advertising, right, which everyone's trying to do right now to make more revenue off targeted enriched advertising. I can also take it with other topics we've seen here at the conference around AI and ML, where I'm using that to enrich the scene data and pass that through in 224, so where I can get a more richer targeted advertising scenario. So the other topic that we talked about was sports betting, so let me pass it back to Greg.
Can we do it? Okay. All right, very good. So sports betting, this is a really hot topic here. I know in the United States it's not quite as prevalent as it is internationally, and so we think there's a really good opportunity to use standard like SCUDY 224 to help, especially when we start getting into betting via when you're in-screen, like in-game betting using a live stream on in a cable television scenario or a TV scenario. We think that SCUDY 224 can help enforce the betting rules so that only the people that are legally able to bet or enabled to bet are able to do so. As we know, there's a positive relationship between betting and increased viewership of games. I think that's something that is proven out and something that will continue to grow, especially as betting gets. It's one of the key. I think it could really become one of the key retainers to keeping people watching games on television. So we think it's very important. Betting types continue to evolve and further engage to retain players, people involved. State law differs and continues to develop, so that's something that always has to be factored in when it comes to like if somebody's going to make it available, on the TV screen or on the video screen or whatever screen they're on. It's important that that's factored in, and we think that technology can enable and manage betting applications in an effective way. The stats are pretty staggering around the amounts, like with the 40 billion wagers online sports betting in 2022, and that's only continuing to grow. So this is an example of how workflow could work relating to betting rules. And so what you'll see on the left is not only the content provider, but the gaming rules elements, the state authorities, the leagues, providing all of the data in order to be able to create the ecosystem, in order to create the betting. So the content providers, the gaming authorities, and state authorities provide the rules. Now, in this case, we're kind of using it as CTS, the linear rights metadata management product, taking that data similar to the ad addressabilities use case with 224, or with taking that data and converting it into 224, so that it's a standard that can be read by all these different applications downstream. And so the content provider is obviously going to send the video through the workflow with the SCUDY 224 markers, noting the start and end of game times of the games, which is done today. And then LRM would aggregate. It could be any tool, but basically aggregating and ingesting the rules and normalizing the SCUDY 224 and storing it in the cloud. And then so then you would envision a sports bet overlay on the video is triggered based on the decision manager, which is the decisioning tool that's matching up the SCUDY 35 and the SCUDY 224 that will enable the bet to happen within the video workflow. And then once that happens, the user would be able to open the application, determine whether they're entitled to the in-game betting, and based on whatever parameters are in the 224 data, and then enable the bets to happen. So that's kind of the that's kind of the general workflow that we would envision with something like that.
Very interesting. Questions? Have you thought much about the legal implications of the responsibility of carrying that information? Losing an ad is one thing, but messing up on.
Well, I think that so the one thing that we didn't talk about in this presentation is that we use a similar methodology to enforce blackouts, and so I think there's a pretty substantial legal ramifications around that as well. Around if something's not shown where it's not supposed to be shown. So I think that that's one of the reasons it's a very reliable tooling and system, which is why we think that it could be very applicable in this use case. I mean, as far as the legal elements of it, that's obviously kind of related to, who the aggregator is, who the content provider is, and who bears the responsibility of that. But the tooling is there to make it, to help it make it work.
Yeah. Brave new world.
What's that?
I said brave new world.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
All right.